So today, a group of nurses protested outside of the White House due to their lack of protective gear, and they wanted to make their voices heard and let it be known that they don't have what they need to do their jobs. Now, I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with this. In this country, when we think that our government is not serving us, protest is a pretty fundamental activity to engage in. In fact, it's so important that it is protected in our First Amendment rights. And so I have absolutely no problem with these nurses staging a protest to say, here is what we need and we do not feel you are providing it. Fine, well and good. But I do find it just a bit ironic because there were a whole bunch of protests in the last week. There were a whole bunch over the weekend in all sorts of different states of people coming out and wanting their states to reopen things, and those people are being largely vilified. They're being vilified as being extremists. They're being vilified as being stupid. Their concerns are not taken seriously. But these nurses, it's okay for them to protest. It's okay for these nurses to protest. It's also okay for these nurses to protest. You have this gridlock protest happening. I believe this was in Denver, of thousands of people in their cars, socially distanced, safe from one another, driving down the street, creating gridlock to make their voices heard. And you've got these nurses standing, or people who we presume are nurses, what I should say, are standing in front of their cars trying to voice their disgust for the fact that people dared to leave their houses and go outside and make their voices heard. Apparently it's okay for these nurses to protest, but not the people in their cars that are safe socially distancing. And honestly, to me, this just seems a bit hypocritical. And listen, it's one of those cases where I'm not surprised that people are not taking the voices of people who are protesting seriously. I'm not surprised. Of course, these are protests that are largely coming from more conservative or libertarian people. This is, if it was happening on the Democratic side, you can better believe there would be wall-to-wall coverage and they would be called, martyrs for their causes and all these things. But no, when it's more conservative, when it's more libertarian, when it's people saying, government, get out of our business and let us do our thing, they're vilified in the press as extremists and stupid and cultists and all of these things. And I just think that that's sad. I think it's sad that people have not taken the time to understand why these people are protesting. And I also think it's sad that, frankly, there's not been any consideration of the fact that they might have a point. And the people calling them out on the protests and making them out to be evil people who don't care about the health of grandma and all those things, well, typically those people have jobs. And typically the people who are protesting do not have jobs. That is the fundamental difference. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more in this video. I'm going to show you some examples. We're going to read an article. But before we get into that, listen, if you like my content, if you like the channel, hey man, it would really help me out. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notifications, give it a thumbs up, share the video with your friends, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it because this is kind of growing, and I would like to see it continue to grow. I'm having a good time. If you think you're subscribed, you might just want to double check that because YouTube has been unsubscribing people from the channel lately. And if I haven't convinced you to subscribe just yet, man, it's cool. It's all good. We can still explore this issue together. So in my home state of New Hampshire this weekend, there were reopened New Hampshire protests up in Concord. It was actually a really crappy day for the weather outside, so I didn't go because I was feeling lazy. I wanted to sit at home on my couch. I wasn't afraid of going though. I was honestly just feeling lazy. But about 400 people, to the best of my knowledge, did go. And so the Reopen New Hampshire group on Facebook has been very, very active. It's been very active. People are, posting all the time, all these different things. Now, this is a thread that got posted publicly just about the protest. And you can see some of the pictures here if my computer wants to load them. And we can look at people that are just out and about, live free or die. Death is not the worst evil in the world. We've got some people, a lot of people kind of congregated in Concord, New Hampshire, which is where the State House is. They're not socially distancing. Listen, I'm actually not a fan of that. I think that people should be a little bit more careful. I think that I am not a fan of wearing masks in public generally, but if I were to go to a protest, I probably would, just because I am first and foremost concerned with my safety. But you can see people are out and about doing their thing. Freedom trumps the commie virus. I kind of like that one. These people are wearing some masks, so it's not as though we can't say no one was wearing masks, right? Report your neighbors, 1-800, you guys can read the rest on that one. So people were out protesting and doing their thing. And of course, on this thread on Facebook, what comes but the trolls? But the trolls posting about why the protesters are stupid and how dare you protest for your fundamental liberties. Now, this is something that I've seen being thrown up an awful lot pretty much anywhere that protests are discussed, is this COVID-19 lockdown protester declining all medical treatment for COVID-19 related medical conditions. Listen, if there are actually doctors and nurses that are refusing to treat people who are out protesting, they're going to lose their licenses. I don't know why people don't understand this. Like, there is a fundamental oath that these people take to treat and to cure people. They are not allowed to turn away patients. So that's some BS right there. What else do we have? Better to die on a ventilator than live in your home for a while, because this is such an easy criticism to make, isn't it? Like, you can't sit around and watch Netflix for a couple of weeks, as though there aren't bigger concerns that people have. I mean, come on. Can we see this one? Oh, this one pops up an awful lot. This is my favorite chart, expressing that, you know what, we actually can take this seriously and also be worried about authoritarianism and also be concerned about people losing their job, people not being able to take a paycheck, and being concerned about those several things are actually possible at once. And then we have this little exchange right here, which I actually thought really kind of teed up this discussion very nicely, where Jacob here says, and by the way, I'm showing this, I'm not doxing anyone or releasing private information or any of that stuff. This is all public, right? So if people are commenting on a public post, I consider their comments absolutely fair game. So Jacob here says, y'all are acting like you've been held at gunpoint to stay in your home. You're welcome to leave and do stuff, but be effing responsible. Any increase in infections or deaths in this state will be your fault. And that's pretty much the general argument against the protest, right? Is you don't care about other people. You just want people to die. I mean, come on, man. So we've got Carl responding, saying, did you perhaps miss the part that businesses are closing down forever and people can't make a living? Jacob responds, opening them up now won't do much good to help. If they decide to take the risk of opening, there's no guarantee they'll make money. Just because places are open doesn't mean everyone will start going out. There's still people who know how dumb it is to go out. And if businesses are willing to put their employees and clients in danger to make money, they don't deserve to be in business. And Bill, ever the observant Bill, responds, Jacob probably doesn't need to work. And Bill's right. Bill's 100% right. And that leads me to the article that I really want to talk about, which is this article that appeared in USA Today this morning. Protests show two Americas: those who lost their jobs and those who are still getting paid. And that's really the crux of this issue, is the people who are protesting tend to be the people who are not working. They have lost their job. They have been furloughed. They have been laid off. They have been, whatever their organization has done. They don't have a steady paycheck coming in. The people who are calling the protesters stupid tends to be the ones that still have a paycheck coming in. Isn't it magical how that works? Isn't it magical how easy it is to assume that someone is stupid when you still have a paycheck coming in and you can pay your mortgage and your rent and you can buy food and you can do all those things? Let's read this article. People don't appreciate being condescended to and bossed around, especially when leaders ask them for sacrifices without empathy or humility. Okay, so the country has been shut down for about a month and we're seeing cracks start to form. Well, some epidemiologists are talking about keeping things closed down for months longer. We're also seeing growing public protests around the nation as people call for restarting things. Others shame them as virus deniers and accuse the protesters of wanting people to die. Listen, if they were virus deniers, then why are all these gridlock protests happening with people literally in their cars, socially distancing, following the guidelines, doing exactly what they need to do? They're not denying the virus. They're protesting, very frankly, politely, following the guidelines about being socially distanced. This isn't even, how these people are painted is just, it blows my mind. It does. Well, let's just keep going. But it's hard not to notice a class divide here. As with so many American conflicts, the divide is between the people in the political/managerial class on one hand and the people in the working class on the other. And as usual, the smugness and authoritarianism are pretty much on one side. We can hanker a guess as to what side that would be. The divide is best summed up by a tweet by Brian Stelter of CNN and a response. Stelter tweeted, "I crawled into bed and cried for our pre-pandemic lives. Tears that had been waiting to escape for a month to escape. I wanted to share because it feels free to do so. Now is not a time for faux invincibility. Journos are living this, hating this, like everyone else." And just side note, so tonight, Tuesday, this is the 21st of April at 9:30 p.m. If you're around, you might want to check out a live stream I'm doing with my friend Joshua. And what we do is we talk about current events, and then he's a psychic, so he has tarot cards and stuff, and we can kind of see behind the current events. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is Brian Stelter telling the truth when he said he was crying like a little girl? So if you want to know that this is true, I personally do not believe this is true, but if you want to know, hey, tune in at 9:30, and if you're already watching after this on the 22nd or anytime after, I'm sure the live stream is on my channel somewhere. Let's keep going. Some people mocked this is unmanly, and in fact it's hard to imagine hearing this from, say, a British journalist during the Blitz, but one response cut deep. Such bravery. Let's all take a moment to think about the journos working from their home while millions have lost their jobs. And that's exactly right. Listen, I might make fun of Brian Stelter, and I don't think there's actually anything wrong for any man in crying like a little girl. If you want to cry, if you want to have a good cry, fantastic. It's an emotional release. I get it, and I don't think there's anything unmanly about it. You may pardon my gendered language. I know I've probably offended someone, but I feel like I'm a girl, so I can make that reference. But listen, he's getting a paycheck. He's probably getting a pretty large paycheck. Brian Stelter is doing just fine. If he can't handle it, I'm sorry. What do you expect of the average, everyday person who doesn't make nearly as much money as Brian Stelter, probably doesn't have savings, doesn't have things to fall back on, has their $1,200 a month stimulus, or not even $1,200 a month, $1,200 period stimulus check, and they don't know what they're going to do, and they've lost their job, and they don't know if it's going to come back. Yeah, cry like the smallest violin in the world playing just for you, Brian Stelter's, for real. Likewise, in Los Angeles, where less than half the county is working now, radio journalist Steve Gregory asked the LA County Board of Supervisors whether any of them were willing to take voluntary pay cuts during the crisis. He was told by the chair that this question was irresponsible, which is to say embarrassing and inconvenient. It is inconvenient that asking them to take pay cuts when average people all over the place are taking pay cuts. Isn't that convenient that it's an irresponsible question? By contrast, New Zealand's senior officials, including the Prime Minister, are taking a 20% pay cut. They just announced, so in New Hampshire, they've been laying off and furloughing people from, basically every major local hospital because they don't have patients. They don't have work for them. And so, we're talking like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people are getting laid off, losing their jobs. And they just announced a big round of layoffs at Catholic Medical Center, which is Manchester, New Hampshire. It's a very big hospital. And so there are several hundred people being laid off, but the remaining people on staff have to take a 20% pay cut. Why? Because there are no patients in the hospitals that supposedly, and I still don't understand this. If someone can explain this to me, leave a comment, and I'm deadly serious about this. I thought that the whole reason we were quarantining was to prevent the hospitals from being overwhelmed with patients. I thought that was the entire reason that we were quarantining, because we needed to make sure that the hospitals weren't overwhelmed. The hospitals are laying people off. The hospitals don't have nurses. And I understand in cities, more metropolitan areas, it's probably a little different than in New Hampshire. But, why? Why are we still quarantining if the hospitals are literally laying people off? It doesn't make sense to me at all. There are really two Americas here. Those who are still getting a paycheck from government and corporations or universities. Universities are about to start laying people off, by the way. And those who are unemployed or seeing their small businesses suffer due to shutdowns. And the America still getting paid so far, not showing a whole lot of sympathy for the America that isn't. There's a formula for disaster, and it has been made worse by the heavy-handed approach taken by some government officials enforcing quarantines. We've seen news stories after news stories of officials going after people whose actions pose no danger of contagion. Lone joggers on the beach, lone paddleboarders off the California coast, a father throwing a ball to his daughter in a public park, and every time that happens, the shutdown loses moral authority. It's no surprise that a major center of resistance to the shutdown has emerged in Michigan, whose Governor Gretchen Whitmer has shown all the sensitivity of an angry third-grade teacher in administering a shutdown regime that often makes no sense, banning sales of seeds in stores that are open for other purposes, or allowing sailboating but banning powerboating. Her response to the protests? A threat to extend shutdowns further seems calculated to inflame things further. This is like a power play. That's all it is. Gretchen Whitmer especially. Gretchen Whitmer, oh my God, please, please, please let Joe Biden nominate that woman to be his VP. Please, please. She will get torn apart for how she's acting in Michigan during this protest. Please, God. Please, please. We need leaders with humility, empathy, and self-discipline. Then there are the hypocritical gestures like Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot's illicit haircut, which she justified on the grounds of being in the public eye. So she gets to get her hair done, but no one else does. Rules for thee, but not for me. Yes, Mayor, you are, but you're being judged on your conduct, not your hairstyle, and your conduct looks bad. People don't appreciate being lectured and condescended to and bossed around. They especially don't appreciate being urged to sacrifice by people who make no sacrifices themselves. And that's a different sort of class divide. When rulers ask for sacrifices without making any, they're displaying a distinct lack of, class. Absolutely right. 100% on board. Ultimately, the rising resentment is itself a failure of public health and of public health administration. You can complain that people are irrational and resentful, that they don't believe in science or whatever, but people are what they are, and their response to epidemics is surprisingly predictable. If your messaging and your behavior inspires resentment that causes people to resist and ignore public health messages, then you have failed at your job, whatever the amount of scientific knowledge you bring to bear. I'm going to read that sentence one more time because I think it's actually a really important point. If your messaging, Gretchen Whitmer, and your behavior, Gretchen Whitmer, inspires resentment that causes people to resist and ignore public health messages, then you have failed at your job, whatever the amount of scientific knowledge you bring to bear. So, such an on-point statement. Sadly, to succeed in their job, our leaders will need to possess humility, empathy, and self-discipline. These traits are sadly short in supply in our leadership class. We will all pay a price for that, though if recent history is any guide, our leaders will pay less than the rest of us. Glenn from the University of Tennessee, a law professor. Glenn, I salute you, good sir. Well done, well done. I will be linking this article in the description below, and I would strongly encourage everyone to share this article far and wide on the social media because Glenn is absolutely dead on. This is one of the best pieces that I've read about the protests and why they are happening. The resentment is not helpful. The calling people stupid is not where did we learn in school that calling people stupid is going to solve the problem? No, we never learned that in school. This is, come on, people. The adults right now are not behaving any better than what we would require of third graders, literally of third graders. Third graders, I can rationalize it. The logic functions of their brain haven't developed yet. Adults, you have no excuse. If you are 25 years or older, the logic function of your brain is fine. You're fine. You have no excuse at that point. So, man, it just feels so good, though. I'm going to just be honest. Like, my final thought, it feels so good to actually read a piece in the mainstream media that is not vilifying these protesters. Listen, I think that everyone should be behaving safely. I think people should be socially distancing. If you're going to be in a crowd of people, wear a damn mask. I don't wear a mask outside because I'm not around crowds of people ever. But if you're going to do what I really think you should, people should be behaving responsibly. But the amount of media coverage calling these people stupid and saying they're cultist Trump supporters, whatever, it just makes no sense to me. It really doesn't. All right, that's all I've got for this one. One last note, though. Hey, because I know some of you like my knitting, so I'm trying to include some new knitting things in each of these videos, and I do it right at the end, so if you don't like my knitting, you don't have to watch. But on this one, I'm like, look at this bright neon 80s shawl. It's got these beautiful giant yard overs in it. This is the West Knits Color Craving shawl. It's an older design. There you can see it in all its glory. This thing is huge. It's like 9 feet long. It has 3 different colors in it. It's one of my favorite knits. I just love the colors. I think it's like the most 80s thing I've ever knitted in my life, and it's a fun project. It's a weird shape. It takes a minute to kind of figure out how to wear it, but it is a very fun, fast project. Again, that's West Knits Color Craving shawl. Hope you like it.